Okay, good evening. It is 7:48. What is today, June? That's what I thought. That's what I was looking. I could find. Oh, there we go. June 11th. We will start the regular scheduled, or I'm sorry, the special board meeting of the Othello School District Board of Directors with the flag salute. Welcome to all the guests. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. I do not think there's a need for translation, so I'll move on to approval of agenda. I will accept a motion.
Move to approve the agenda with the addition of item F1 under executive session for a period of last 15 minutes for evaluation of a public employee with no action taken.
Been a motion by Director Ashton to amend the agenda to add the item F1, which is an executive session for 15 minutes for the purpose of evaluation of a public employee with no action taken following.
First.
It'd be a second.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, second.
And that was a second by Director Stevenson.
That was first.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, we'll move on to item B1, public comment. I don't believe there's any request for public comment, so we'll move on to item B2, board member reports. First would be legislative report by Director Stevenson.
Today I wanted to talk about SB 6617. That is a Senate bill. Senate bill? Yeah. They are talking, it's the Legislative Public Records Act. This legislation is considering putting this into effect, that they do not have to give, that public records no longer would have to be given out. And it could apply to school boards as well, or city councils or port districts and all kinds of different things that they would not have to give out public records. They are applying it to, one of the specific questions was that I got off of their legislative website was, how did we get here? Since the Public Records Act passed in 1972, the legislature has been consistently advised that the legislature is not subject to the full extent of the Public Records Act because it is an independent branch of government like the courts. And so a short time ago, some media organizations sued that they should, that act should cover the legislature. And so they actually put it through saying as a law that they would not have to do anything, but the way that it was worded could apply to many other public organizations. Not that I think that as an individual we should follow that, but it is just a really interesting thing that they have done that. That's, I guess, what I wanted to say. Just that it's out there now.
It has been out there many times that there's been bills tried to be pushed through on stopping the public records request, or not stopping them, but squeezing them down a little bit on the information that could be given out there. But I know there's a couple lobbying groups out there that are very, very strong in the publishing industry that have a stronger lobbying when it comes down to it, that it's really hard to get anything to pass.
They've already passed this. They passed it really, really fast. It was kind of a surprise to everyone that it passed so fast, but I just thought it was a really interesting law.
To themselves. that exempt the legislators themselves, wasn't it?
That was all that I had about the legislative stuff today.
Okay. The next item, if the board remembers, we decided to divide the ends policies into 3 different meetings to evaluate whether or not they were compliant to offer the superintendent the incentive. And so there are 2 focus areas in ends 2. They've been included in the attachment. And so my question would be whether the board feels that the first focus item, well, I'll read the whole thing. In an environment of equity and respect, each scholar will graduate with the academic success and ethical behaviors to succeed as a responsible citizen and ready to compete in our global society. More specifically, each scholar will graduate with the knowledge and 21st century skills to access post-secondary education or a meaningful career. That's the first bulleted item, and the question is whether or not the superintendent has made reasonable progress toward that. One thing I do want to point out, this was, as a board, we used the wrong monitoring response document when we evaluated this. We found him in compliance. That was last year, and so we didn't use the monitoring response document where we say if we felt there was reasonable progress toward it. So it's up to the board to decide that themselves now. And I guess we can start on the end with Tony.
In that particular measure, because I realized that the monitoring response document was done incorrectly, so I went back and found the monitoring report that Chris submitted back in, I believe it was November. And it looked like mainly he was setting it for that one first bullet point, his baseline and what they plan on doing, but there was not a lot of evidence in that part, so I'd have to say no on for the first measure.
I would have to agree with Tony. Going back, looking at the past, and I know what was done in November of last year, and we weren't sitting on the board, so that's what I only had to go by. And I'm looking at the first 2 words on this one, and it says each scholar to me. So that's each individual. I seen evidence on what was going to be put in place to reach this. I even seen where the goal was in 4 years. And we're just starting the 3rd year of that one. So at this time, I don't feel we're there yet.
Now, one thing I want to just remind the board, as it's worded in the contract, should the board find the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the provisions of the relevant ends policy and the district is making reasonable progress toward achieving the desired results. So keep in mind, this is just progress toward, not necessarily the end game. So.
This was a lot more difficult for me to come up with an answer for because, like Ken said, he and I were not in office at that time, so it's difficult to give an answer on a monitoring document that I would have had a lot of different questions and stuff on. But I did feel like with the reasonable progress towards achieving the desired results, I did feel like yes on the 21st century skills portion.
I would also say yes, and I say yes because the opportunities to acquire that knowledge and the skill set, I think, although Ken and Tony are right, were part of a plan, they were there. And I think that's going to be very hard to, how do you ask each scholar to know that they do have this knowledge? I think the fact that the opportunities are there to acquire this knowledge, to obtain these skills, I think is reasonable progress towards achieving that goal. So I'd say yes on that.
Keeps on coming to me as a tiebreaker on these things. So with this one being, the situation was that we evaluated this pretty early in the year. I am looking at this as really what was the plan. I know we don't have the results of it, but But based on the plan, this was, I think, an ends that report that I thought was well written. As a board member, I could track what the plan was and what the expectations were. Based on that I do feel that there was reasonable progress toward because of the plan that was in place. And so I also feel that it was compliant. Well, I guess reasonable progress. I shouldn't say compliant. That's the wrong word. But so with that, it sounds like there were 3 board members who feel they're reasonable progress. As a result, then there will be 1 outcome from ends 2 so far that is eligible for the incentive. The next item then in that the bullet item is each scholar will be knowledgeable and skilled in global competencies, including investigating the world, recognizing perspectives, communicating ideas, and taking action, financial skills, stewardship, and effective decision-making, personal health and fitness competencies, and cultural competencies and sensitivity to our culturally diverse community and world. We'll start again with you, Tony.
Collectively as a whole, I felt like that there was progress made in 3 out of the 4 areas here. And so overall, collectively, the only one of those 4 was the measure on students feeling safe. But the other 3, I felt like that Chris had made reasonable progress, and they met the goals that he stated and that were clearly stated out of the 3. So I feel like yes on this one.
Again, this one was difficult for me. I had to go back to a couple things to take a look at it. And I actually went back to the previous one, compared it with last year's also. And again, there was a plan laid out, but there was really no evidence to me showing that these were met. The personal health and fitness, I looked at that one, and I seen it was done through surveys, through the students. And to me, getting those numbers through a survey, I don't think is quite accurate, especially to high school students. So I think there needs to be a different way to look at those, or different way to see if the kids are meeting the goals.
I did not feel like this section was met for reasonable progress towards achieving it.
I think there was enough progress, and this is probably not fair to use, but if I sat my daughter down, who graduated this year, and asked her specific questions pertaining to a lot of these things, she would tell me that I think she made enough progress to where I felt comfortable that she was given the instruction needed to achieve these tests.
And for me, I think it's the same as what I just said on the first bulleted item. I think it was easier for me to understand the measures, the targets, and I know it was early in the year. I think we have that corrected for next year. We're going to be evaluating more toward the end of the year, so we'll see outcomes. But I felt that this was reasonable progress with the plan. So based on the feedback that we've gotten, there's 3 board members that feel that there's been reasonable progress to both bulleted items. So that will result in the incentive bonus for the superintendent on those 2. At our next board meeting, we'll have N3 that will have 3 bulleted items again. Same thing, I appreciate the research the board has done, so make sure we do that research for that one before we evaluate that. That was well done. We were able to get that through that really quick. You guys had done your research on that. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item B3, student representative reports. Way down there.
Hi. For Desert Oasis, we had our barbecue last Thursday, so So that's where all of our family members and graduates could come and eat with everybody, kind of like a last hurrah kind of thing. And then our graduation was last Tuesday. That went really well. Thank you for everybody who came. It was a lot of fun, and it was really awesome to see everybody get a graduate and get their diplomas. So I also wanted to kind of comment on some of the stuff that was said at the board meeting. As far as the speaking out, I feel as though the high school it's not as friendly to, when I was there, I didn't feel comfortable going to the principals or even the counselors when I had an issue, because from personal experience, when I did have an issue, it wasn't dealt with. It was just kind of cast aside, and I really feel like the admin there needs to kind of step up their game as far as fixing issues and reprimanding students when they are bullying, because that is a really big thing and it's getting overlooked. So I would really like to see that change within the next couple of years. And also, yeah. My experience was a couple years ago, but there was an incident this last year with one of my friends. Obviously, I can't really speak on her behalf because I wasn't there in the room, but it was also cast aside with that situation. Yeah, for sure. I feel comfortable talking with anybody, and if there was an issue, I would definitely feel comfortable getting that issue resolved, because I don't know how to explain it, but I'm more comfortable with my admin in-house here at Desert Oasis than I am with the high school. So I can't really speak on Taylor's behalf either, so I don't know how she feels about that. As far as student reps go this next upcoming year, I would really like to be more involved with the kindergartners and elementary schools. So I was kind of thinking, me and Kaden had kind of talked about this, maybe going more often, maybe like once or twice a month to the schools and seeing all the schools and be more interactive and really getting involved with the schools, because I feel like we're really not right now. So I think as student reps, we're representing everybody and not just the high schools. So that's what I would really like to do this upcoming year. And maybe if we could, you know how the school board goes and they have their school visits, doing that twice a year with each school, like at the beginning and then at the end. So we're kind of seeing the progress and where they started and where they're ending.
So you're suggesting the entire board, not just student reps?
Not just us. I would really love the student reps to be more involved, but I'd also really love the school board to be more involved as well. Since
we're talking improving the calendar, that's a perfect time for you to say that.
That's it for me. Any questions?
I think that's really brave of you to be able to feel like you can say that, that you weren't being listened to at one time. And I think that that's easier to say when you feel like you are being listened to now. But that's disheartening to hear. But I would rather hear it than and be aware. So I think that's brave of you to even say that. Thank you.
All right, so a couple weeks ago we had senior finals, which were a week before the graduation. Then the grads graduated on June 1st. Then we had our underclassmen students, they didn't graduate, excuse me. They had finals on June 6th and 8th. We had Super Student Assembly about 2 weeks ago where we honored students who were super. And that was when we had our annual switching seats, where, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, I don't know. But like, at the end of the year, after the Super Student Assembly, the seniors come from their section and they sit down and they watch a video, just kind of like cardboard confessions. And then they say, all right, move to your next year. And you see all this excited and this buzz where they switch from, say, like me, I'm a sophomore, I switch to the junior side. And then other people switch to the freshmen, switch to the sophomore side. And then the new freshmen are going to come in. And that was very like, it gave everyone just a realization that like a lot of the seniors, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm graduating, I'm no longer here. So I thought that was just kind of important that that small gesture means a lot to a lot of the students. And then graduating class was honored throughout the last week, whether through final performances like the band and the choir, or through banquets as like the track and field. We also had a lot of the club banquets going on. We had a band banquet, and the track and field banquet was sadly going on at the same time. But I do know that there's a lot of kind of wrapping up and doing some awards and stuff like that for each little club, which I think was really cool that we've been doing. And obviously this is my first year, so I can't say anything about what the board can improve on. I just want to say I really hope, and I'm really excited to be a part of this, and I really hope that we can make it kind of a motion, for lack of a better word, to get other students comfortable coming to us. Because I know now I'm the junior class president, but it's still, I want to get people excited to, if you have a problem, you can come to me and I can bring it to the board if you don't want to come up yourself, because there's a lot of kind of there's gossip going on that well, the board said this, the board said that, but being here, I know that didn't happen. So I just want to hope that we can kind of make other kids more comfortable coming up to us and taking initiative to help us, because we're here to represent them, but it's hard to represent people when no one comes up to you with problems. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's all I have.
It's just as hard to get community input if you just expect them to come to you. You have to set opportunities as well and invite, so keep that in mind. It's not an easy thing to do.
Can I kind of comment on what Taylor said? I feel like as student reps, we need to make a bigger effort to make people feel more comfortable to come up to us, because not a lot of people, students understand that they can come to us with problems and will relate it to you guys. So maybe if you guys could kind of help us with ideas on how to do that and how to improve ourselves, and maybe we can kind of make a change together. And also I missed one thing, parent involvement. I know when we went to the WASDA conference last year, it's gonna be really fun this year, by the way. We sat in on a session with a school that had a lot of parent involvement, and they had a couple other things going on, but their main thing was parent involvement, and I really think that should be one of our main focuses, and hopefully us student reps can also help with getting student involvement, but also parent involvement. So I think that'd be really beneficial for everyone. So that's it.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item C1, required approvals now. I'll take a motion, or I'll accept a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the required approvals.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion by Director Stevenson to approve, second by Director Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to superintendent comments now. There are 2 items in here that the superintendent has placed. One was, I think, a direct response to questions from last board meeting, correct? And then the other one is, I think Dr. Hirsch just wants us to make us aware of when his plans to be compliant with the different ELs. So did you want to present the first one, or is it just informational, both of them?
Just informational for both of them.
Okay. Do we have any questions first on the responses to K-8 questions? Okay.
I did. And this, we're hearing a lot of this from the public, and it's, like I said, it's one of the questions I get hit with all the time. And it's with number 3, what are the cost implications? I know you got ESD 1, 2, 3 working on it, but a lot of people want to know what we are spending now out of this current budget for the process that we have been going through so far. And where's it coming from out of the budget funds?
So what we've done related to facilities themselves and the cost implementations related to the ESD, I don't believe we've incurred any additional cost. It's been folks that we've partnered with in the past, some architects that we've used in the past, folks with the ESD who have assisted the district for several years with bond initiatives and those kinds of activities. We reach out to them and say, hey, we have these questions and initiatives going on in our community. Would you come help us think about it? So it's really been that kind of outreach. We did have a conversation today with Teeter Crocker, who was a group that came in, I think, just over 10 years ago and did an analysis of our facilities. And so we've asked them for a quote around what their services would cost, but we haven't incurred any of those costs as of yet.
Any other questions on that item?
Still on item 1, right? The
Yep.
responses.
Okay. The second item, the executive limitations compliance document. Is there any questions by the board for clarification or on that?
Yeah. Are these dates in here, Chris? Is this the dates when we're evaluating these policies next, or this is the soonest date that you expect to have them in compliance?
These are the dates that we want to have them, expect to have them in compliance. It does not align to the calendar. So some of them are before that, and we want to bring it back to the board and say that they're in compliance.
Yeah, so my concern, I guess, for the board is do we want to add these dates back in on our monitoring response document of these policies? How are we going to track them as a board so we know that this is that this is when Chris has stated he's going to be in compliance so that we can make sure we're doing our job? Or do we add them as calendar items, or what's the best way to handle that? I'm just curious what the board thinks. I think it's great. I appreciate you doing it. I just want to make sure we don't drop the ball on our end.
I personally feel that we should be adding those dates because we did find them out of compliance, and we need to review them again to make sure they're in compliance. And the target dates that were given, I think, is a good place to start. So, as you say, we don't drop the ball on those, and
So
we keep on our.
we should add them to our monitoring response documents, you think, or just put them in the calendar somewhere?
Put them in the calendar so we could review them again.
Okay.
And make sure that they are being brought up to compliance.
Ditto, I think that's a good idea, put it in the calendar somewhere. I mean, just to make the note after that board meeting. But I had a question. Most of these dates are are generally the same date in the end of September, but then there's EL4, staff compensation and treatment is not until October. And
Well, there's one in May and August as well.
August.
There's
The one
just
above
above
the
it,
October is
13.
in August.
Well, and then there's, right, I know there's one back into May, but I guess why is number 4, other than 16, which was just added, the safety of students and staff, why is that one so different?
So I felt that we could do a lot of our work during the summer, which is why you see the September 24th. So it really gives us opportunity to, and plus, it's right when school starts, so we still get to incorporate the students and the parents' part. We can still do a lot of thinking during the summer and still get into compliance with a number of those ELs. And then the other ones was just looking at the calendar and just spacing them out just to give us more time. It's not just trying to take on too much at one time.
Yeah, for my personal feeling as a board member, I'd rather have a legitimate date than a date that's over aggressive and have to say you're still not in compliance again. So it's whatever you think is reasonable, as long as it's not 2022 or something, I think it's fine.
I do see one that is put out over a year, and that's an issue that was even brought up tonight, and that's 16, and that's public safety, and that's 1 year from now, May 27th of 2019. I would still like to see some progress towards that, or being shown progress towards that between now and then, instead of waiting to that fourth state to see it, if it's compliant.
So absolutely. So in my conversation with Chief Shank, we sat down, we talked about EL 16 extensively. We both agreed that we're starting right now, so that doesn't mean that we're going to not start anything. We're starting all the conversations, but there's just a lot of work after him and I talked about it. There's just a lot of things that need to be done, but we felt that we would be in full compliance by that date. But we will start implementing things right away.
So you could request, Ken, at any time you could request an update on progress to be had in the board meeting. So you could make a mental note somewhere to say, hey, I want to get a request on progress, and then this is the date that he's saying it'll be in full compliance. I agree with you that they have to make,
Actually,
they have to
I'll
make
do that right now.
progress.
I would like to see progress every 3 months from now.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Absolutely, no problem.
So my question would be, if we take these dates and add them to our calendar, are we then going to expect a report on September 24th to these findings? Does that become the new date we monitor this, or?
Yeah, you do by governance rules that when we find an out of compliance and we specify the date that it will be in compliance, we do re-monitor it at that date, from my understanding of policy, but it doesn't change the monitoring date forever. You'll monitor it again on the normal calendar. This is just a monitoring report to get it back into compliance.
Yeah, in BSR 4, it states all policies will instruct the superintendent, will be monitored on a schedule according to a frequency and by a method chosen by the board, which we've done. And the board may monitor any policy at any time by any method, but ordinarily will depend upon the schedule method outlined in BSR 4.1. So at any time we can do exactly what we're doing. That's what our policy states. Just a couple, some I'll make the board aware of. I have requested to Dr. Hurst put on, what you guys don't see it because it's part of the publisher, but asked that he create all board meetings for the entire year, all board agendas, so that at any time, if the board says something like this, hey, let's have that board discussion, our second meeting in September, I can go in there and add that as a board discussion. So we could also do that. Rather than calendar it, we could just put it into those agendas that are already drafts, so it's there and then won't be forgotten that way. If that's okay with the board, we could do that rather than not calendar,
Make sure we don't miss the
as
date.
long as it works, right? So that's an option as well. The other thing I was going to ask is, and it's actually in our monitor and response document today, expected compliance by May of next year. Well, that's when we monitor the document or the policy anyways. So does that even need to be in there? That was my question. I mean, we expect compliance by next year anyways, otherwise it's going to be out of compliance 2 years in a row, right?
I think it should be in there just because it'll take me a minute to find the policy, but I know we have a current policy that says anytime there's the superintendent's be found out of compliance, he's supposed to give the board the date that he'll be in compliance. Even if it is the next monitoring cycle, our current policy does say that we expect that of the superintendent.
Okay. So would that be something, Dr. Hurst, that we could just, based on your expectations for compliance, we can put those in those board meetings, agendas, and then the other request was every 3 months, correct? Ken?
On the 16th, yes.
To get an update, not necessarily a full monitoring report, just an update?
Just a progress.
Okay. And was there one other thing we just talked about that we wanted to have calendared, or was that it?
Isabel suggested we go to each school twice a year.
Yeah,
Right, but I'm talking about what we do in, as far as putting into the,
That was just a
Yeah.
calendar thing that we talked about. That was the only other thing, I think.
okay. All right, so if the board's okay with that, then it won't take a calendar revision. Okay. Got it, all right. Any other comments or questions regarding superintendent comments? Okay, so we'll move on to item D1.
Move
Is
to
it-
approve item D1-1 and D1-2, monitoring response response documents.
Been a motion by Director Ashton to approve monitor and response documents for EL 12 and EL 16. Second by Director Garza. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I have not refreshed my screen, but there is an executive session in here now, right?
After policy review, right?
Yeah, I almost jumped ahead again. Thanks, Tony. Okay. Policy review. I'm going to try to get through these with you guys faster because we do tend to spend a lot of time on these. So this is what we've got here is in the EL1 through E11 through E15. We've got EL12 and 16, which were both what we just monitored, so they're automatically in policy review. The EL16 does have that one word revision suggestion. EL12 has no changes. GP 7.1 has the calendar that was actually approved last meeting, but it was pointed out that I made this. Where's our red, black and red? No, I mean the black and red calendar I made.
Yeah, I think it got, I suspect it's a formatting issue when it goes into board docs, that there's no color in board docs or something. Because it wasn't in
colors?
black and red last year either.
Man, anyway, I perpetuated the whole issue with scheduling a Monday meeting on
I would like
Memorial Day.
just for me, a laminated calendar just to put it in my normal section where I sit for board meetings at the pool ring.
YouTube videos, Pete?
Technological issue, I apologize.
But that one could be in black and red, right? Okay. Great.
Anyway, so that Monday, May 27th was changed to Tuesday, May 28th for that final meeting that's on the calendar. GP 4.1 was just, and BSR 4.1 were just because of the changes we made to the numbering, and actually it caught some changes that weren't picked up before on the wording of some of those policies. So really just kind of some housekeeping kind of stuff.
Are you requesting first readings on those or final readings?
The board can do it however they want. If because it's just really reflecting what we already have approved, it's just really a schedule that's all in one place for us. You can do it however you want. Obviously, we can do first and final on all these, in my opinion, because 16 is a one-word change. It doesn't change the whole policy.
Technology technically there's been
no changes, and then ends 1, 2, and 3 are just formatting changes. So all of these, just so you know, that none of the policy was really changed.
Move to
per se.
approve EL 16, GP 7.1, GP 4.1, BSR 4.1, ends 1, ends 2, and ends 3 as final readings.
Been a motion by Director Ashton to approve all policies in policy review with the exception of EL 12 as final readings.
I have a discussion before do we have to do a second, then do discussion?
Nope, you can discuss before.
Okay, so on Monday, August 13th, the special meeting for the budget hearing. It says community input available before the meeting. I don't think we want community input before the special meeting, before the regular meeting.
Or does it say before the meeting? It says at the start of the meeting.
The start of the meeting, which...
Okay, so there's a special meeting at 6 p.m. That's the budget hearing on the 13th. And then at 7 p.m. is the budget approval with the community input for a regular meeting. For the special meeting of the budget hearing before the budget approval of the regular meeting, I don't think that we want to have, my thought is, community input at the special meeting before the regular meeting.
Why?
Because the whole purpose of that meeting is a special meeting just to hear the budget hearing. I think that we would want community input at the regular meeting where we discuss their approval.
Actually, it's supposed to be public input, and then we have our regular meeting to approve it.
The budget
We hear-
hearing is input.
Yes.
It's by law. So we're required by law to have a meeting before we approve the budget as a board to hear any community input. And so it's a hearing. It's a special meeting, but it's really a hearing. It's more like a forum-based, where there'll be a presentation on the budget for the public, and the public can ask any questions they want. The public input at the beginning of the board meeting would be more along the lines of, could be any input, but regarding the budget, it would be more statements of I think the board should vote for or against this budget based on these things. So they're two different things from my view, but I understand what you're saying. It could be confusing, but by law we have to have a budget hearing before we vote on the budget.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussions or a
Could always
second?
be written better in the calendar, but I know what you're saying.
I just want to say it's a copy and paste, Jen. Second by Director Garza to approve. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Wait, I did some discussion, Mr. President. I would like to schedule a time in a future board meeting to discuss school visits. I like them. I think they're fine in the calendar how they are for now, but I would like either in the next board meeting or the one after that. I don't think it's sometime between now and the beginning of the year. I'd like to have a board discussion and director discussions about what our purpose is, what our objective is behind school visits, why we're doing them, what we're evaluating or not evaluating, and talk about the schedules before sometime during the summer.
You won't be at the next board meeting, right?
Correct. That one would be a great one to do that.
So let's do it at the board meeting after that.
Yeah. If you want my input.
And we'll do the same thing. We'll just make sure we add that to director discussions for the July. Anyone help me before I get to it? July 9th? All right, the July 9th.
Just from my perspective,
Regular meeting.
I think I brought it up before, that the student visits are one of the things that we've been doing since before policy governance. I'd just like to get the boards. So hopefully between now and then, board members can reflect on the purpose of board visits to schools as it relates to governance. Because I don't think we're very clear on what we're doing and why to this. At least I'm not.
Okay, I don't know what that had to do with this motion, but point taken.
Just because we're talking about calendars right now, it's one of them. It doesn't
Any other
calendar maybe.
Any other discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You jumped the gun too fast again. And so we're left with CL12, correct?
As stays the same. If there's no motion, right?
Oh, yeah. Good call, Tony. That's right. I thought you wanted to talk about that policy. Okay. So we can move on to item F1.
Just a really quick statement on review and discussion of the policy. And this is going back, being new on the board too, and policy governance. And right after we first got on, we reviewed the policies and everything else. But then in February, coming up, all of a sudden at one meeting we had 23 policy revisions. And it happened again last month. That's kind of overwhelming, especially learning the policies and everything else. I would really like to suggest or figure out how to write it into policies to limit it to how many you could bring to a meeting at one time, because it can get overwhelming. I went back and reviewed some of the ones that we did do back in March, and I go, why'd we take that sentence out? You know, if I had to look at it or had a lot more time or had a lot more knowledge of it, I would have second questioned why we did some of the revisions. And it was just so quick, especially being so new on the board. It was just overwhelming.
I agree with what you're saying, Ken. I would say that if you give it time, Since I've been on the board, that's only the second time that's happened. The first time was when we instituted policy governance, and I think the reason why all those changes happened at once was due to having a substantial change in the board and a need for the board members to revisit. So I don't see that happening at least until the next election, unless I think there's 2 board members coming up again in 18 months. So I guess we'll see what happens then. But I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
And it wouldn't hurt to have a
And-
policy to that effect. But
Yes.
But my experience in governance is that's not the norm, and so I don't expect that to be the norm going forward.
Unless you, like you said, there's 2 more board members, and then it's going to be just as
So every
overwhelming
18
for
months.
that. Yeah, for them too. So
Every 2 years.
And anything you see that you say, man, I don't know if I would have done that this time, you can always add it back in and.
add it back in,
and-
and I plan to do that. I plan to
Okay.
look at that, and I plan to get your guys' advice on where we could do that.
Okay. All right, item F1 then is an executive session that was added for the purpose of, supposed to be for the purpose of evaluation of a public employee. We only started doing that because we want to make sure it's worded just like the RCW words it. And I think that's how it's worded, right?
Do you
Evaluation of
wanna-
a public
Do
employee.
you want to do that here in this, or do you want to go to somewhere else in this building, or what's best?
Conference room? There's a conference room right next door we can go, so
Okay.
we'll recess into executive session. It is 8:53, and we'll be back, sorry, 8:35, I'm dyslexic. And so we'll be back 8:55, is that what you guys said? Would give us 5 minutes to get over and back? Okay, 8:55, we'll be back with no action.